Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Powell. I'm here to talk about my new solo debut CD called American Composers at Play. And this is the last segment of four where I talk with each of the four composers who not only participated as composers, but also as pianists. And I am honored and delighted to have as my guest today the dean, the elder statesman, the grand poobah, if you will,
Ooh.
American composers,
Yeah,
William Bolcom. Thanks, Bill, for joining us.
sure. Delighted.
So great to have you. So, if I may, Bill, go through a short list, highlights of your accomplishments, because there are so many. But in case people aren't familiar with all the things you've done, I'm going to just run some things off and you correct me if I get it wrong, okay?
Sounds good.
You've won a Grammy Award, a Pulitzer Prize, the Paris Prize in Composition. You're a recipient of the National Medal of Arts. You have made 24 albums with your wife, mezzo-soprano Joan Morris, which is amazing, 24 albums. That's just incredible. You've written 4 operas, 4 violin sonatas, 9 symphonies, 12 string quartets, 12 gospel preludes for the organ. You have 4 volumes of cabaret songs and 3 musical theater works. Did I cover it mostly?
That pretty much covers it. Well, other things, including a lot of chamber music and other things I could go on, but never mind. If anybody really wants to do it, go look at our website, look at williambolcom.com, and you'll hear and see everything you want to know. The catalog is pretty complete and as far as I know, pretty up to date.
I don't think you knew this at the time, but in 1992, when your opera McTeague was being premiered at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, I was a member of the apprenticeship program and I was in that opera.
And so
Yeah,
you're in
I was one
that.
of those guys. Yeah. So I saw you from afar. And then that's fast forward to March 2017, where I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to premiere Oliver Jordan in your latest opera, Dinner at 8, at
Mhm.
Minnesota Opera. And you were there through all the rehearsal process. And then the European premiere was October of 18, which you traveled over and were there for.
Sure, in Wexford, Ireland, which has every summer a 2 week festival of obscure operas. Mine was super obscure because it was brand new, so nobody knew about it except where it had been premiered. And it was great and wonderful because we were able to recuperate a great deal of the original cast from the Minnesota Opera. And you came over.
Everybody should be performing that opera. I just think it's a gem, and I love being a part of it.
It's very practical. It's something that a lot of people could do.
So then it came to the time when I was proposing this project to you, and not only including your compositions and choosing the repertoire, but asking you to perform. And you graciously accepted to play for me and your tunes on this CD. But you had sort of been retired from playing in public or recording. So nice to come out of retirement for me. What was that part of that decision?
Well, in 2015, I fell down and broke 8 ribs, which in itself,
I remember that.
that all healed fairly well. But it caused a kind of a, well, I was already having trouble with arthritis, but the worst is that it also, I, I became a victim of neuropathy, which is a kind of, where you can't feel your leg, when you are not quite sure where you are, and also, just a sense of self-confidence. I always had a wonderful resident technique. I could do terrifically well with very little practice. No longer true. So that was a bit of the problem I had and still do. The piano parts I wrote for all those songs were written by a person whose technique was in solid shape. Now, coming back with things that I have to simplify all the times, I can't reach the 10th anymore. Some chords are very hard to play because of the problems I have with my hands. So I had to kind of rework just for me for the several of those things that we recorded, simply because I just had to, given the equipment that I have now. So I think that is probably okay because people are really listening to the singer mostly anyway.
Well, that's interesting that you were willing to adapt your own compositions. I mean, that's not something perhaps you often have to do once they're written, or do you?
Not usually it's true, but I mean, if I hadn't done it, we couldn't have done it this way. We would have to have
Well,
somebody else to do the piano part. And believe me, I did entertain that thought because I'm not sure I'd be able to handle with the same thing. Somehow I've been able to accommodate a little bit my limitations, and so Joan and I still do perform a bit, but we're sort of retired from hustling. Now,
At this point in your life, you don't need to hustle anymore. I would think
I
you
hope
should
not.
talk a little bit about the cabaret songs that I included on the CD. String Quartet was sort of the centerpiece of the CD and of your music. So we had to find, I think, 4 or 5 other songs that sort of surrounded that and gave a flavor of your other compositions. And so I chose one piece from the old addresses, Lady Deathwood, and then 4 cabaret songs, Satisfaction, Waitin', which by the way is like a spiritual, and I just loved singing that. Can't Sleep, and then probably the most famous of your cabaret songs, if I may say so, Black Max, as told by the Kooning boys.
Arnold Weinstein and I worked together for 45 years, and who wrote the text for Black Max and all the cabaret songs, and 3 of my operas. He always thought of himself, Arnold, as a theater poet. It was much more interesting to him to have them performed than to get them published, with the result that he has very few publications. I was very struck by the whole fact that they were such theatrically viable pieces of work. I mean, when he was visiting Rotterdam, he knew of a fellow named Black Max, who was a kind of strange street person who would never say anything. He wore a cape, and he had his hat, and he would raise it to people, and he never said a word, and he was sort of this local character.
But of course, he was a real person. He was observed.
A real person, yes, was kind of a street person. And people have always asked me, is Black Max death? I said, no, it's just a street person who raised his hat.
He was always dressed in black, long black jacket, broad black hat, sometimes a cape, and as thin as rubber tape, Black Max. He would raise that big black hat to the big shots of the town, who raised their hats right back, never knew they were bowing to Black Max. I'm talking about a night in Rotterdam, when the right night people of all the town would find what they could in the night neighborhood of Black Max. There were women in the windows with bodies for sale, dressed in curls like little girls in little dollhouse jails. When the women walked the street with the beds upon their backs, who was lifting up his brim to them? Black Max. And there were looks for sale, the art of the smile. Only certain people walk that mystery mile. Artists, charlatans, vaudevillians, men of mathematics, acrobatics, and civilians. There was knitting needle music from a lady organ grinder, with all her sons behind her. Marco, Vito, Benno, was he strong, though he walked like a woman. And Carlo, who was 5, he must be still alive. Ah, poor Marco had the sif, and if you didn't take the terrible cure those days, you went crazy and died, and he did. And at the coffin, before they closed the lid, who raised his lid? Black Max. I was climbing on the train, one day going far away to the good old USA, when I heard some music underneath the tracks. Standing there beneath the bridge, long black jacket, broad black hat, playing the harmonica, one hand free, to lift that hat to me. Black Max, Black Max, Black Max.
You taught at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for 35 years.
That's right.
And tell us a little bit about that element of your life, teaching composition rather than actually composing.
Well, I found that in many of these schools, throughout the United States. There was a very strong anti-tonal, total chromatic point of view. Boulez would say anything that was not written in 12 tone is not worth listening to, and there's kind of absolute polemic, which sort of scared the heck out of a lot of people. And I think there's many composers in Europe who are still scared by that whole kind of terrifying thing. You have to be modern, but really it's not modern at all. It's just a very mechanistic way of composing. I mean, it's great when a piece like Berg's Lulu or Wozzeck, which is written 12 tone, but it's straight to your heart. So it's not the element, it's how it's done. And so one can make very wonderful music 12 tone too, but you don't have to. But that was the point right there. At that point, there was enough awful lot of peer pressure to have to do this whether you wanted to or not. And you'd find that both in academia here or there, or in academia in Europe too. So it was one of the things I had to find myself working against. Not that I don't have enormous respect for Boulez as a composer and as a conductor.
So you came up first as a pianist, and then you started you studied actually with Darius Milhaud.
Oh, that's quite a bit later. But now, when I was 4 or 5, I was taking piano, and then I was at the University of Washington. We were living in a town about 30 miles away, and my folks had some nice connections with a man who ran the university bookstore, and his name was Lyle Goss. He did a lot of jockeying and working hard, so I would get a scholarship to go to the University of Washington School of Music there. It was a General Motors scholarship. Scholarships were just coming in, and it was just basically what it was my tuition being covered, which in those days, in 1959, came to $900 a year. Compared to today,
$900 a year for your tuition.
Oh yeah, just the tuition. Now the rest I had to work. I had to work jobs to be able to pay for. My folks didn't have any money, and so I was working nights at the hotel. Mark Dempsey, but he actually produced a show which was quite shocking on Broadway called Oh Calcutta, one of the first nudist Broadway shows ever. But here in Seattle, he was a guy who was really a connection man. So he would call me and says, well, you can play this particular place tonight, Friday, and then Saturday you can play another one. And so I would go there and show up, and they did pay. And it meant that I could live a little bit more comfortably than maybe I would have had without, because I didn't have any other money. And oh gosh, the things I had to play. I had to play everything. But stag party would be the frat kids, and I remember one. There was this kind of grandmotherly lady came out, and she had my sweet little Lala's blue gown. She had this kind of gown, and then she turned around and she was all naked underneath there in the back. And then she would go over, and she these poor little frat kids to dance with her, and then she would come over and she would put her breasts on my shoulders while I was playing. It was so kind of funny. And then I would take the bus home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because I was going to play church the next day. So at 6 o'clock, I played bass.
Well, after that, you had to go to church, right?
Absolutely. But I mean, it really made a kind of a wonderful schizoid background. So I had a combination of classical music and, half-naked grandmotherly strippers. I was doing all kinds of whatever I had to do for money. And it was actually a good education.
The trump card in a fixed game. She brought the Iron Man, Lou Gehrig, to his knees. Mocked Babe Ruth at home plate. She skulks around the circus grounds looking for an accident to happen. She was the last person at the Alamo. She fed Larka a mill of bullets. She waited table at the Last Supper. She hired the barber who cut Samson's hair. She was the last Roman soldier at the crucifixion. She tricked Custer into thinking he was God. She's hotter than a pimp. She's cunning. She's cruel. She's after me. She's after you. She wears a top hat. She carries a cane. Her eyes are daggers. But your heart. dress